Call to order our committee of the whole meeting, Monday, June 8th at 5:30. If I can ask the clerk, please, to take the roll call.
Trustee Bachner.
Here.
Trustee Kargi.
Here.
Trustee Vasquez. Trustee Vasquez.
I don't see him.
Trustee Brennan.
Don't see her. Okay.
Trustee Pennick.
Here.
Trustee O'Connell.
Here.
President Ducey.
Here. Okay, so we need approval to do remote participation. So if I can get a trustee to move and another to second to have remote participation, I appreciate it.
Make a motion to approve the remote audio and video conference.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Erica. All right, so our next is public comment, and
Can I take a vote?
oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, voice vote's fine.
It's sorry.
A voice vote's fine?
Right, Greg? Yeah, voice vote will be.
There's
Okay,
a
all
pretty
in-
bad feedback.
Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's
Going
got
on.
to mute their phone until it's your time to talk.
Yeah, I thought we decided we were going to mute everyone. Yeah, hang on.
John, can you hear that? Put a mute on everyone for a second. Thank you.
You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing you are unmuted.
Okay, Eric, everybody but the community room should be muted at this time.
Okay. Okay. Very good. Can then you all hear me? Okay.
Okay, Trustee Brennan, are you here now? Okay. And so I'm going to take a voice vote on the motion to approve for remote participation. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay. So we'll go ahead with the public comment first. We have 14 speakers, and Dan actually gave us a great idea, and I will use it. And that is to name the first three so that the other two are ready to speak when the first one or the one before it is finished. I want to remind all the public speakers to please keep within the 5-minute time frame. It's important so that we can get all of your neighbors and residents to speak. Like I said, we have 14 speakers, and we'd like to get everybody to speak, and we also would like to have a discussion among the village board. So with that, the first three will be Judith McDevitt, David Flint will go next, and then Deb Wilkes will go third. And so if I can ask if Judith is on the line, if she can maybe give us a chat.
Oh, it looks like Vasquez
Yeah.
joined.
Yeah,
Eric,
Russ
this
is there.
Eric, this is the part I'm trying to work through is how they're
It-
unmuting themselves here.
Well, if Judith can just send us a chat that we can unmute them, right?
If she's just called in from her phone, she wouldn't be able to chat us from her phone.
Okay.
Give me just 1 second here.
I'm trying to think of how many people we have online. Okay. How many people do we have?
If there's any
people?
Zoom experts on the line, feel free to chime in.
All right.
Hey, it's Bob. I think if everybody mutes their own phone, and then I think that might help us to get started, as opposed to having Jonathan do it, for the whole group.
Okay. Well, then you unmute everyone.
They are.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right.
And so if you could please mute yourself when you're not talking, that'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Is that *6 or your mute button? Can
Yeah,
you hear me?
if you're on the phone, please dial *6 and that'll mute you.
I've got this. Thank you. Judith, are you on the line? Judith, okay. Is David Flint on the line?
Who are you calling?
Judith McDevitt? McDevitt?
Yes.
Okay, yes, hello. You're up first. If you could please go ahead and give your public comment. And again, I remind everyone to stay within the 5-minute time
Okay,
frame.
is this a Zoom call, please?
Yes, this is a Zoom call.
Oh, so we could have video somehow if
Yes.
we had the...
Yes, I think on your lower hand if you're on a laptop, just put yourself on video.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have. They didn't put the. They didn't say it was a Zoom call on the website. They just said it would be streamed. So I'm on the phone.
Okay. No worries.
And I have an echo as well.
Okay, because everyone needs
good
to
evening,
go on.
I will speak. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. I'm Judith McDevitt from 411 Ashland Avenue, apartment 5B. And we've lived in River Forest since 2003 and enjoyed how beautiful, friendly, and well-run our village is. So I've also come to think of River Forest as forward-looking. Not long ago, our trustees passed a welcoming resolution defining River Forest's response to the Muslim ban and deportation efforts. We declared that we welcome all law-abiding individuals and families, regardless of their immigration status, and that we would conduct law enforcement accordingly. So also District 90 has also stepped up to a broader vision of the future. They've had a strong equity initiative throughout their grades, keeping our schools at the forefront of excellence. And most recently, River Forest has achieved wide participation in Census 2020, and that was through broad community involvement. Our numbers now stand at 79.7%, which is the highest in our area, and the results are still coming in. These are all things to be proud of, but the future always holds new challenges. Our affordable housing policy is one of them. I appreciate the Plan Commission's work on crafting the policy now before us. There have been many meetings, several public hearings, and lots of research. The document packet is huge, and the detailed record of the Commission's work is all there for you. Still, what comes across in reading their report is that this is a minimal, very tentative policy. The vision is small and hedged in with cautions not to diminish property values. Affordable housing is still seen as a problem and not as an opportunity for solutions. Rather than making recommendations for changing zoning ordinances and development standards to support affordable housing, the plan offers possible additional considerations for other bodies to explore. It comes up with zoning bonuses in the form of relaxed height, setback, and parking requirements as the best and only way to induce developers to include affordable housing. And this is again with the caveat not to diminish property values. Well, the Lake and Lathrop project that I live very close to got relaxations in height, setback, and parking requirements and is now going forward without any concessions on affordability. Why would things be any different if these relaxations became bonuses that could readily be given away if needed to have the project go forward? So tonight we are at a crossroads. Will we do as little as possible so River Forest can remain in the same as long as possible, or shall we embrace the future? Shall we act with equity in mind, consistent with the needs ahead? Will we invest in the future for our seniors, our civil servants, our family members in need of housing, for others who want to live here or already live here? The Affordable Housing Plan can be strengthened. There are several provisions that the trustees could add to it. First, they could amend River Forest Comprehensive Plan with a policy to preserve existing affordable multi- and single-family housing wherever it's possible. Mm-hmm. Second, they could require our TIF districts to either preserve existing affordable multi- and single-family housing or to replace existing affordable housing with new affordable housing on a one-for-one basis so none of it is lost. 3, they could amend the zoning ordinance to provide for incentivized inclusionary zoning. 4, they could amend the zoning ordinance to accommodate accessory dwelling units and integrated supportive housing. We need all those kinds of units in River Forest. And last, they could adopt a goal of at least 10% affordable housing, rather than just saying they would try for the minimal 10% housing. So that's all I have to say tonight, and I hope you were able to hear me well, and thank you for listening.
Yes, Judith, we heard you very well. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You
David?
are unmuted.
David Flint, are you here?
So in between speakers, to help control echo, John is muting everyone and then unmuting everyone so we can try and get the speakers.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're unmuted now, Kathy. Go ahead.
Okay, David Flint.
Mr. Flint, if you could identify yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. All right, continue. I hear echoes. Can I continue?
Yep, we can hear you. Maybe just a slightly louder. That would be good. And if you can just tell us your name and
Sure.
in 5
David
minutes.
Flint. Sure, I'm David Flint. I and my family have enjoyed living in River Forest for about 20 years. The schools and management of the community have always had my highest confidence. I don't speak up often, but I felt the need to speak to this opportunity towards win-win solutions regarding affordable housing. I teach graduate level courses dealing with these type of issues at Adler University and at Dominican. My story started regarding this topic about 8 years ago with my daughter Lauren. Back then, contracted development people penned a, quote, corridor plan that included raising our condos where we live to the ground to develop higher cost mixed-use properties. After hearing the basics of this, my 9-year-old daughter, with no prompting, put 3 points on an index card and came before the trustees pleading to not make 200 families have to move away. Thankfully, after these meetings, the plan was voted down and at least archived, but unfortunately not put down for good. Since then, local special interests got what they wanted, after all, in high-income condos, Lathrop and Lake, and even high-end care facilities coming to fruition. That's a good thing. My second point, though, recently and presently, we've seen other things of our past come to fruition, but in the form of bad fruit being thrown out and cut down. Racism, discrimination, and other ill effects, many of which stem from the wall of inurement that extreme wealth can build over time in a community. This can be seen and read between the lines in this proposal. This proposal is rife with 16-year-old cut and pasted developer language that extols the, quote, existing character and development pattern in River Forest, and, quote, the character and other desirable features that have evolved over the village's 139-year history. This is the opposite of white flight language. This seems more like white fight language. We know real estate at River Forest, when available, is very expensive. We know no one wants that to change. That's all well and good, trying to keep property values up. But try asking the same of condo dwellers I mentioned earlier that are still underwater in a market that won't recover for them. Third and final point, language like, quote, diminish the value of neighboring properties feels like data deficient fear-mongering. Please show us data that proves single-family homes values will fall if the affordable housing rate is managed upwards, even a mere 1 to 5 more percentage points. Speaking of data, the data in this proposal is old, not correlated well, or too high of a level to paint an accurate picture of win-win possibilities here. More quantitative research needs to be done first, and qualitative research by way of hearing all of our voices about building not just an affordable river forest, but an affordable region for all. Please vote no. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Okay, after I'm going to ask Deb to speak, and after Deb, it will be Mark Shellstead and Dan Lauber. Okay?
Can I just ask? I'm getting a message on my computer. The host is asking me to unmute my mic. Should I do that or no? I shouldn't.
Yeah. Yes, John is doing the
Right. So John Pape is, yeah, just leave it muted, Katie. John is going and manually unmuting everyone so the person can speak. Once we can see who's speaking, then he's individually muting all the phone folks.
Okay, I won't touch mine.
Yeah, don't touch it.
Thank you. Okay.
Trustee Brennan, only if you need to speak.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Right now it's Deb Wilkes, and I would ask that everyone, or you're gonna mute. I mean, we got a lot of feedback going here.
Yeah, and John will go
Okay.
ahead.
So Deb.
Okay, yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, my name is Deb Wilkes. I live at 1138 Franklin, and I thank the board for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm speaking to request that the board not accept. Okay, yeah. Okay, right now it's Deb Wilkes, and I would ask that everyone
Okay. We hang on, Deb.
Okay, so Deb.
Hello. I think you muted Deb.
Yeah, Deb's on 9101, I think, John. So John, unmute 773-9101.
Okay.
All right, Deb,
Okay,
try
are you
talking
able
one more
to hear
time.
me now? Okay.
Yes.
Hang on, Deb? Yes. Oh, I think you muted. Yep.
Yeah, Deb's on 9101, I think, John.
I think she's unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay, so I should.
773-9101.
Okay, there's somebody. We need to mute. There we go.
So John knows who's speaking now. Now he's going through and remuting all the phones individually.
Okay.
So just do a second.
Are you ready for me to
Yes,
begin?
we're ready, Deb. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, my name is Deb Wilkes. I live at 1138 Franklin. I'm speaking tonight to request that the board not accept the affordable housing plan submitted by the Plan Commission. I listened to the audio of the Plan Commission's meetings from the past year, and I thank them for the many hours of work that they have put in. I would like to note a couple of things that I heard repeatedly in those sessions that give me pause. One, it was stressed multiple times that while the village could be penalized for not having an affordable housing plan, it could not be penalized for failing to reach the goal laid out in said plan. It concerns me that the focus might have been more on checking a required box for the state than in actually creating a specific and strong plan for River Forest that the village would truly strive to achieve. Whether or not the state will penalize River Forest for not reaching a goal, I'd like to have confidence that our village really plans to try to make it happen. Second, in the plan discussions, it was noted that there are many creative ways to maintain the affordable housing that we have and creative ways to get more. Yet, there are no creative or new options given in the actual plan. The only options stated are those that are identical to the ones from the 16-year-old template used to write the plan. We are in a very particular moment in our country and in our community. For almost 4 months now, we've been rightly celebrating essential workers who have supported our communities while many of us sheltered in place. Let's not just say we value essential workers. Let's be deliberate and more proactive in making this a community where more of those frontline workers who make modest incomes can live and thrive. Many in our country are finally opening their eyes to the racist policies all white citizens like me have been complicit in letting continue. A particular stain was left on River Forest last week when a racist resident and prominent local real estate developer verbally and physically assaulted a young black woman. I believe that everyone who worked on the affordable housing plan and on the village board disavows that behavior in no uncertain terms. But we can do more than that. This is the time to take a long, hard look at our plans to see if we are doing enough to make it possible for Black and brown citizens to enjoy the benefits of this community. I'm certainly not saying that there is any racist intent in the affordable housing plan. I am saying without a more robust and actionable plan and a true desire to meet its goals, there may be racist impact. Because of centuries of institutional racism, Black and brown citizens are more likely to need affordable housing than white citizens. Our village must back up the words of valuing diversity with a specific, strong, affordable housing plan that will allow and entice a more diverse residential population. And I'll note here that due to time, I'm not fully addressing the other populations that will benefit from a more effective affordable housing plan, which includes seniors and those with intellectual and or developmental disabilities. While I appreciate that it's frustrating to have to go back and rework a plan when you thought it was completed, I urge you to slow down, vote no, and ask the Plan Commission to consult experts in affordable housing when reworking the proposal. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Deb. Thank you very much, and I appreciate your succinctness. The next is...
Sorry. Madam President, I communicating with John here. So we're going to keep everyone muted. And so whoever's next, if we would just ask them to *6 their phone, that should unmute them. So
Oh, okay. Very good.
Sorry for the...
No, that's a very good suggestion. Thank you. Okay. So Mark Schellstead, if you can *6, right, your phone, you'll be unmuted. That's a better idea. Mark?
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Mark.
Thank you. And thank you for the committee opening this up for those of us that want to make a quick statement on this. I'll summarize first by saying that I am very much in favor of the plan that you folks have all worked so long and hard to put together. Unfortunately, this is something that was thrown at us from on high down in Springfield, and we're unfortunately losing a little bit of the flexibility that we as citizens have over our own community. That's not to say that affordable housing is something to be avoided. Rather, it's something that, as you folks have put together a good plan, I think it's a good start, and we cannot move too rapidly in this direction. A 10% goal is, I think, more than sufficient. We're almost there already, so I'm thankful that we will not have to have any large forced changes on the community. I've been a resident here for 30 years. This is my second home. I currently live at 1435 Monroe, and of course my kids have all gone to school here, and that was one of the primary reasons that I was attracted to the community in the first place. I really am concerned, however, with the cost of schools and everything going up, and the cost, therefore, of taxes going up. As I approach the so-called senior years, I have much more empathy for those folks that are on a more fixed income. And so I'm very much concerned about property values. And I'm very happy with the way things have been developed over time. We've all moved here for a reason that involved keeping good schools in the family, having strong and stable property values. And so anything that would possibly interrupt that is a concern to me. I'm also concerned about looking at things from an economic point of view, how one will be able to accomplish a more ambitious goal than what is already planned. And that's why I like what we have planned and nothing more. If we have to do multiple residential buildings, it almost implies that height limits will have to be waived, variances given, and so on. And I don't think there's many people in the community that really want to have a lot of that in areas that is next door to them. I, of course, I will admit I am a little bit of a vested interest because I live close to North Avenue, one area that potentially could be targeted for this. So I like the low-rise nature of the community, and I hope it stays that way. All the other issues that have been brought up tonight, of course, are valid. I'm not going to talk about them because I think what we're trying to do is focus on just this issue. So with that, I'll say thank you, and I hope you do support what you've worked on so hard and vote yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mark. Okay, so Dan Lauber. Dan, if you can *6 your phone, I'd appreciate it.
And if Mark could *6 his phone.
Yeah,
too.
and Mark, if you can go on mute, which is *6. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Dan, we can.
Okay. At this pivotal point in our nation's history and the history of River Forest, I urge you to vote no tonight on the motion to adopt the proposed affordable housing plan. As you're no doubt aware, I've been suggesting that the plan include 5 recommendations that would actually put some teeth into it and provide genuine guidance to the Village and Development Review Board. I suggest amending the comprehensive plan to establish a policy of preserving existing affordable housing to households with modest incomes, because zoning decisions and development decisions are supposed to be done in accord with the comprehensive plan. We have no such policy there. We were assured when the comprehensive plan was adopted that would establish guidance in this affordable housing plan, which unfortunately has not really been done. I've urged adopting effective incentivized inclusionary zoning, which will actually enhance property tax revenues for the village and get new units built. I've suggested that at least we adopt a policy that at least 15% of dwelling units in all new multifamily developments be affordable to households of modest incomes. And that we have a policy for TIF districts that assures that we do not lose units. When the TIF districts were being discussed, there was all this concern that it would be used to eliminate affordable housing. If we do not have a policy that requires those units to be replaced, we will lose affordable housing. And indeed, with a condominium of 16 units that's joined together to sell their building to a developer, those are 16 more units we could lose, in addition to the 5 we're losing on Bonnie Brae for the condo development, and the 6 townhouses, very modest income townhouses by Village Hall, that would be lost if the medical building goes through. That's another 27 units of affordable housing lost. And I've urged that we establish a goal of at least 10% affordable, not just 10%. These recommendations never saw the light of day during our affordable housing planning process. They were never discussed by the board, plan commission. They were simply ignored. They and other modern policies for preserving and producing affordable housing should be studied, very factually vetted, go through a thorough planning process complete with an affordable housing workshop or 2, and thoughtful examination of current tools and techniques to preserve and produce new housing for our neighbors with modest incomes, with a well-qualified expert who really knows current affordable housing policy and techniques. It's a lot of work, no question about it. It's a lot of information the Plan Commission and Village Board will need to digest, and a lot of careful thought given to them. The crux of the matter is, while I'd love to see the board add these policies to the plan here, I think they and other policies warrant a thorough vetting and discussion in a non-Village Board venue, perhaps the Plan Commission, where they are given serious consideration and factually considered, and data is considered. There's the planner's adage that the better informed decision makers are, the better decisions and choices they will make. I think that what I'm suggesting here will enable the village to do that. This is not the River Forest that my wife and I and kids moved to 32 years ago. While there are elements in the community who, like you just heard before me, favor the exclusion of the past, I have little doubt that most river foresters favor a more inclusive river forest, not a less inclusive. We're at this pivotal point in American and river forest history where it appears the nation is finally willing to address social justice and inequity. The bottom line is who can live in our community is the core of social justice and injustice and inequity, of dealing with them. It's time for river forests to engage in a fully informed, thoughtful, inclusive, and thorough process of planning for affordable housing with the expert guidance that can better inform our decision makers. It's time to restart this process by voting no on the motion to adopt this very flawed plan, engage in a planning process that will enable us to show that River Forest is willing to seek the social justice and equity that so many of us and our elected officials profess to favor. Affordable housing is a national problem. It is solved, however, at the local level. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dan. You were right at 5 minutes, so very much appreciated.
America.
If you could star 6 your phone, Dan, that would be great. Megan Castellano. I always, yeah.
Cascatello.
You know Megan. I call you Megan.
That's all right. Just call me Megan. I'm Megan Cascatello, and I reside at 8125 Lake Street. And first, I'd really like to express my appreciation for everyone who's taken the time with this plan. I know a lot of work has gone into it, and I have a great deal of respect for all of your efforts. I know it can be really frustrating to be asked to hit pause so close to what feels like the finish line, but that's what I'm asking you to do today. Hit pause, respond to the historical moment we're in, take another look at the plan before we vote. While I appreciate all of the hard work that's gone into it, the plan is missing some things that I think we need to have before we can approve it. The first thing we need is a commitment to maintain our affordable existing housing that's written into the comprehensive plan, since that's our guiding document for the village. We need to tie our affordable housing plan into the goals of the village, which are expressed through the comprehensive plan. Without that tie, we don't have a mandate through which to pursue affordable housing goals. Currently, our plan just says that the village should prepare and adopt an affordable housing plan that meets state requirements, and that the village should seek to improve the condition of existing affordable housing in the community and appropriately consider affordable units as a component of future residential development. This doesn't meet the minimum standard of protecting existing affordable housing or adding affordable housing stock to reach at least that 10% state minimum. Another thing our plan lacks is specificity, information, and metrics. And I've identified several ways that I really would like to see those things exist in the plan before we move forward. I'd like us to identify affordable housing within the village with specificity. That's something that is required by the IHDA. The IHDA says the plan has to include the identification of lands within the jurisdiction that are most appropriate for the construction of affordable housing, and of existing structures most appropriate for conversion to or rehabilitation for affordable housing, including a consideration of lands and structures of developers who have expressed a commitment to provide affordable housing, and lands and structures that are publicly or semi-publicly owned. We need to identify current and potential future affordable housing locations much more closely. Right now, we just say Madison, Harlem, and North Avenues. We don't have anything very specific in that part of our plan. Our plan also lacks the means of tracking growth or loss of affordable housing over the lifespan of the plan. The current iteration of the plan lacks goals tied to metrics, and I think it's really important to have goals that are tied to metrics. Other local villages and towns have these details in their plans. They state their goals, the means by which they plan to meet the goals, and the dates they can expect to have met the goals. They have language or proposed language for ordinances, resolutions, and tax solutions. They've established permanent commissions, boards, and trusts to navigate all of those issues, and they've engaged with outside experts to reach their goals. We lack granularity in our understanding of our housing cost-burdened households and severely cost-burdened households in River Forest, and they are here. The charts provided are non-standard, and they don't provide a granular look that we need to fully explore the issue of affordable housing. We require a full picture of River Forest in order to select the best plan options for our village. we can't do this on the basis of the charts we have because there's incomplete data. The plan also doesn't meet the AHPAA requirement of an identification of opportunities for the development of affordable housing in the village. Other plans similar to this include maps and graphs identifying these sites exactly within their respective villages. For these reasons, I'm asking that we pause, we reach out to an independent affordable housing expert, we have them review and enhance the plan, and we look at the examples of other local high socioeconomic status villages who have enacted comprehensive affordable housing plans with no loss of interest in development in their villages and no loss of property value. We deserve a better plan. We deserve to take our historical moment, take our time to think about how we can best serve River Forest through real, comprehensive, inclusionary housing plans that reflect the deep desires we have in this village to keep our seniors in place, to allow single parents, nurses, teachers, and public servants to have homes in our community, and to commit to keep residents who want to be in River Forest in River Forest. This is our first test as a village after our world has been changed by the global pandemic and the reckoning of institutional inequality. Let's take our pause and make sure we pass the test. Please give us that chance.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thanks.
If you *6 your phone, I appreciate it. Is Phil Carmody on the line? Phil? Phil? Phil Carmody.
So if you could *6 your phone to unmute yourself.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, great. All right, hold on. Let me set my timer again.
That's a good guy.
Okay. My name is Phil Carmody, and I'm speaking today on behalf of Opportunity Knox and the young people with intellectual and developmental disabilities that we serve, also known as warriors. I'm also speaking for families that they belong to, as well as a greater community that supports our mission to support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The community that we serve includes River Forest, Oak Park, and Forest Park, and we're proud to make our home the River Forest Community Center. We wanted to begin with some gratitude. I think we wanted to say, first and foremost, we're very grateful to have the chance to contribute to this process and serve in a community that's open to exploring significant systems of support. Thank you to the Planning Committee, trustees, village president, and the village at large for considering a plan to approach this very important system. We've been serving our community for more than 10 years. And over the course of that time, we have said many sad goodbyes to the warriors that have made the bold move of leaving their family home. In these instances of farewell, there has been 100% incidence of these young warriors leaving their community for a residence in another town, village, or city. There are currently 0 supportive housing options available in River Forest, to my knowledge. These facts give us purpose in registering another public comment here. We can do better to create opportunities for these warriors to consider if they aim to live outside the family home, but still live in the same community where they grow up, form friendships, form jobs, and build an interdependent connection. We have an opportunity and obligation to do the work to change this fact by building a stronger, affordable, supportive housing plan. We were excited to hear that there was a conversation in place because we're working on one ourselves. It's a large part of our mission as it fully connects all the things that we do. In following the River Forest plan development, we watched for the revisions and noticed there was a large gap in that plan in that the supportive piece was not addressed. There was no detail to what could exist, and the things that we were finding were significant and many resources to consider bringing to a greater plan if you can form a partnership with a village and make a social contract to go for establishing these residences. We submitted our comment in March, went on the record, and just caught up with the progress of the plan these last couple of days to find the new plan, the revised plan that was proposed for approval. And we believe this plan lacks conviction, creativity, and substance. And I read some of the text in here, especially related to the other alternative goal in the Act for making 15% of all new residential construction And what it says to me is that there's a sense in this plan that you're willing to sacrifice purpose for preserving wealth. And if, in fact, that interpretation is correct and you adopt this plan as it is, what it says to us as an organization and our purpose is that the village is not quite prepared to commit or at least explore further substantial effort in carving out space for people with disabilities to live here. And then that then forces us to question if we've chose the right community to set down roots for our organization. We have specific points that we've presented, and we have specific points that we can bring to the table in regard to what can be built into this plan. We want you to commit to a policy of preserving existing and replacing removed, affordable and supportive. We want you to commit to an effort to pursue the resources that can support these developments, properties, and prospective rent subsidies through a system or a commitment similar to what the Oak Park Housing Authority does. There may even be partnership that we can consider there. We also believe that a useful measure here would be to commit 20% of new units coming online to an affordable, supportive resident. And we hope you will adopt a goal of at least 10%. So, we believe in the practice and the elements of supportive housing and the philosophy that comes with it. We know these are hard times, and you have a lot to think about as a village, but we have located a large cache of resources that can be considered in a revision. And we're raising our hand. We're raising our hand and our voices of warriors in our community that, frankly, in listening to some of these comments, are still invisible. So we're here with purpose today, and we hope you're hearing us. We hope you reconsider voting yes. We hope you vote it down and push it back for a revision and ask for more people to contribute to the process, and we will be the first to raise our hand. Thank you for the time.
Okay. Thanks, Phil. Okay, if you can please start 6 your phone, and then we can ask Tim Brandhorst if you're on. Tim? If you're on, if you could star 6 your phone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Great. Hey, everybody. Tim Brandhorst, 600 block of Ashland. Cassie and trustees, thanks so much for the chance to speak with you tonight. I always appreciate the opportunity. I'll tell you what I'd like. I'd like for the teachers who educate our kids to be able to live here. I'd like for our village staff to be able to live here. I'd like for our first responders who serve and protect us to be able to live among us too. And I'd like every downsizing senior who wants to be able to stay in our community. I believe that a more economically diverse village is a stronger, more vibrant village. That greater diversity always leads to better outcomes. And I think that diversity of housing stock is no different. In short, I want the people who work here to live here. I want the people who live here to stay here. And I think that we should all want that. But in order for that to happen, sufficient affordable housing options have to be available. That is where the rubber meets the road, to have a more inclusive, more equitable community. And as a village, we're going in the wrong direction. We are losing affordable housing stock faster than we're replacing it. A previous speaker tonight referenced the 10% goal as reasonable and said that, well, we're close to that already. The truth is, we're going to lose 0.5% just with the projects we already know about. We're going backwards. And the plan before you is going to do nothing to reverse that fact. This is the planning equivalent of throwing up your hands and saying that there's nothing we can do. What's missing in this plan? Well, a lot. More data, better tracking, more metrics to evaluate success, specific language addressing housing stock just in the TIF districts, a goal that at least 10% of our housing stock be affordable, a one-to-one mechanism, even a fully prospective one that would only truly impact affordable units that are built in the future and not impact current homeowners, provisions with teeth that ideally would be used to lead to affordable housing growth, but also could be used as bargaining chips to achieve other development goals. creative ideas that other communities across the country have adopted, some of which have been suggested to you by the community in the many months since the comprehensive planning process has begun, but were just ignored. Look, guys, we could be national leaders. We could be the model for how an affluent community demonstrates its commitment to equity, livability, sustainability, but this plan is just a missed opportunity. That's no criticism of the Planning Commission. That's no criticism of the individual commissioners. They spent multiple meetings trying to improve the work that they were provided. I'm grateful to them for all that hard work, all that effort. What I'm saying is just an acknowledgement that we can do far better. To me, the obvious next step is for the trustees to simply do what you all seem to agree that you're going to do. You talked about this in public session over the course of multiple meetings over multiple months, going all the way back to last fall. You said that once you receive the plan from the Planning Commission, you're going to engage in your own process. You're going to rely on a neutral third-party affordable housing expert from outside the village. I hope that you will allow that process to move forward. I hope that you won't treat this policy as just another box to be checked off, and I hope you make a commitment to this issue. Look, I know procedurally that there's a motion, that there's a second. I would ask that those be withdrawn. If the vote proceeds, I hope the rest of you will vote no. I hope that you'll take steps to fix what's being proposed, and I hope that you'll come back to the village with a better, stronger, more equitable plan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tim. If I can ask you to star 6, I'd appreciate it. Megan, if Megan Hodge, right? If you could star 6 your phone.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Megan Stewart Hodge, and I am a River Forest resident, as well as the founder of an advisory practice that focuses on fostering cultures of inclusion. For my statement tonight, I would like to share an excerpt from a letter that my husband and I sent earlier today to Village President Aducci, the Board Trustees, and the Village Clerk, which expresses our concern with the current version of the Affordable Housing Plan that is slated to be addressed during the Board of Trustees meetings this evening. We urge you, the Board, to vote no, or request that a vote on this plan be postponed until the current version of the plan has been reviewed in conjunction with a third-party affordable housing expert. The plan has been revised, and the community has had the opportunity to review and provide feedback accordingly. As engaged community members, we believe that a comprehensive, equitable, and inclusive affordable housing plan should align with and support the broader River Forest Village values and strategic objectives. On the heels of last week's horrific hate crime in our village, River Forest has gained national attention as a community in which a long-standing resident and a local developer attacked a young black woman in broad daylight on the basis of her race. The River Forest community's immediate attention to and demand for accountability, coupled with the urgency and severity of the River Forest Police Department and Cook County State's Attorney's Office response in charging this individual, has been recognized nationally as well. However, we, collectively as a community and our board, must ensure that we demonstrate our commitment to inclusivity and to ensure River Forest remains a great place to live now and in the years to come, an excerpt from a welcome letter to new residents, to ensure that we do this intentionally and proactively, not just in a reactionary manner to a community tragedy. A critical component of this intentional community inclusion is a socially just and equitable affordable housing plan, which allows our residents to age in place, encourages our teachers, our nurses, our first responders to live in our community, and ensures that our village is investing in our economic health. In response to last week's hate crime, Village President Kathy Aducci shared the following inclusive and important message with the community. We will take proactive steps to discuss the values of River Forest and how community and livability are important to all of us, and how we can live together without biases and hatred. That is our everyday obligation to the River Forest community. Otherwise, without this ongoing conversation, we are not a community at all. Now is the time for us, the collective community, along with our board, to ensure our actions reflect our commitment to inclusion, equity, and livability. by revising the current version of the Affordable Housing Plan. My husband and I shared several proposed amendments to the current revision of the plan in our letter, which I will not reread now. There have been many very strong such proposed amendments already shared this evening. Instead, I will just reiterate that a vote of no to the current version of the Affordable Housing Plan, or better yet, a postponement of tonight's vote, is critical to the integrity and inclusivity of the Village of River Forest. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the thoughtful message. Josh, is Josh Ehart on the phone? *6 again to mute and
Hello?
unmute. Yep, there you are. Hi, Josh.
Hi there. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Josh Ehart. I live at 522 Park Avenue. I rise in opposition to this approach and ask for the postponement of the vote or a no vote so that this can be reworked. I think in light, it's moments like this where we have to transition our rhetoric and hope for the future to policy and procedures that create the futures that we talk about. And if we're going to be a thriving and forward growing community in the future, we need to build more diversity into this community. And it's really disheartening if you looked at Twitter at all last week when the events that happened at Jewel occurred. The general consensus is that this is a racist community. And this is comments from biracial, indigenous, people of color. They generally see it that way, and it's because we don't have the diversity we would like as a community, and that starts with providing affordable housing. And I think this is that point, and we can put policies and procedures in place and say that's our desired outcome, but without accountability, there is very little incentive to do so. So I asked for the amendments that were proposed earlier. There's sort of five key comments from, sorry, hello?
Yep,
biracial, indigenous, sorry, I'm hearing a lot of background. And it's because...
Okay, well, you have to hang on, Josh, 1 minute. If you can, everyone *6 your phone. We're getting some kind of background noise, except for Josh.
Okay, got it. President Aducey. Josh, if you could try again.
Do you have me?
Yeah, we can hear you now, Josh.
I think there's been multiple proposals for amendments, and I would urge that those be examined by an independent third party. When you walk around this beautiful community, you see the variety of housing that has always been a part of it. And adding more affordable housing and more types of housing to deliver that affordability merely adds to the character of the community. So I say thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I urge you to postpone the adoption of this plan, and thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Josh. Thank you very much as well. Lorena, I'm probably not quite sure I pronounced that right. If you're on the line, if you could *6 your phone so you could speak. Everyone else, stay on mute, please. Lorena? You want to take that's her name, Lorena? Okay. I'll give it. I'm trying to think if there's somebody on the line here.
Marina, if you can hear us and press *6 to unmute yourself.
Yep. Thank you. All right, we'll come back. I'll come back after we do the other three. So I want to hear everybody. The next one is Carolyn Kilbride. Carolyn, are you on the line? Just unmute to *6.
Oh, Kathy, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now,
Okay,
Carolyn.
good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah,
No
thank
worries.
you. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time and all the comments. I appreciate it. My name is Carolyn Kilbride. I've been a resident for, over 23 years. I live at 1335 Park Avenue, and I am a commissioner on the Planning Commission. So I guess I have prepared comments that I want to speak to, but I just do want to say thank you for all your comments, but I've been a bit flummoxed because I guess we didn't hear a lot of these comments during the 4 working meetings that we had. And I appreciate your comments that you have put forth tonight. I do want to speak towards what I felt was very upsetting for me. I would like to speak towards the accusation of plagiarism. And I think a few of you have hinted towards that with this old document regarding the approved River Forest Affordable Housing Plan. And, you know, again, this was approved by the Planning Commission, of which I am a member on May 20th, and it was approved unanimously. And I just want to state that in the process of developing our affordable housing plan, it is reasonable to expect that when tasked to develop this document, one would look to similar villages and cities that have been through the process and have a plan in place. It would also be reasonable for us to use this document as a template and modify accordingly to reflect the specific goals and objectives with which the Planning Commission is tasked by these trustees. Using another similar village's affordable housing plan as a template to begin our process is not plagiarism. So I did find that comment offensive and divisive. We did, through these 4 meetings, which, you know, a lot of time was spent, education off time. I know for lots of people, if you're not up to speed, you spend your own time trying to understand the process and understand the issue. This plan was reviewed extensively. It was discussed. It was commented upon. It was modified and subsequently approved unanimously on May 20th. These meetings were open and transparent. Extensive comments were provided to the commission by several residents, including Mr. Lobb, and I appreciated his comments. He spoke, I want to say 45 minutes to an hour, and it was very helpful. But his comments, along with all other comments, were given serious consideration, and this document was modified via an informed committee. So I do not feel that this plan is flawed, and it does provide the guidelines necessary for our village to continue to look to meet and get to and above the affordable housing goals. So I do strongly recommend that this plan be approved, and I do feel that this accusation of plagiarism and is looking to undermine or reverse the results and recommendations of the Planning Commission. These results in this plan was approved and reached by a legitimate government process. So, and there's other, I just feel again that this plan is the proper way to go at this time and to meet the objectives of the village. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Carolyn. If you can stick your phone to mute yourself, that'd be great. Is Blarina on the phone? I want to make sure I'm not pronouncing her name. Belina? All right. Susan Conti, are you on the line? If you are, *6 your phone, please. Susan?
I'm.
Oh, okay. We can hear you.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
You can?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, everybody. This is Susan Conti. I live at 711 Thatcher. It's good to be back. I first of all wanted to address the things that were being said about our consultant real quick, and then just a real brief thing about the affordability plan. I've been a resident in River Forest for almost 30 years, and I've served as village trustee with many of you for 12 years. And I want to say that passing along hearsay and unsubstantiated accusations against a resident who has also honorably served as our consultant for at least 15 years is one of the lowest forms of community action. I was proud to work with John when I was a village trustee, and I also worked alongside him on the Community Foundation board. John Houseo is a friend, and he's a friend to our community, and everyone that knows him knows this. The highest ethical conduct of an elected or appointed official would be to personally approach and have a conversation with John. I have never known him to back away or not welcome a conversation and answer questions about his work or give his opinion. So who chooses not to personally approach your colleague when struggling with questions? What kind of people are we if now, In this charged environment, we act with injustice against our neighbor. We are no better than those we accuse of being blind to another's humanity. As far as the River Forest affordability plan, I commend the board for their work. I have long hoped that we can welcome those who choose to live here throughout all generations and welcome those who desire to live here at all income levels. As you all know, this plan has been formulated over the last 9 months in the public sphere, hidden from no one. 7 River Forest residents, staff, and our consultant worked in a democratic process to formulate the best plan for River Forest within the physical constraints of our village. The village board has been apprised all along the way, and I'm sure many of you, or some of you at least, have attended those plan commission meetings and know full well of the efforts of those commissioners. So how can it be that now, 9 months later, somehow this isn't enough and the time and the effort expended doesn't suit the interests? This policy will only serve as a template for your action as a board. It doesn't hamstring you in any way, and it doesn't prevent your decisions in the future from being implemented. Many of these great ideas that I've heard tonight can still go forward with or without this policy in place. So I ask you to honor the work of those on your commission who unanimously approved the plan and to vote yes. Lastly, I want to remind the board or the people that were there, of a few years ago when the uproar ensued when we put forward an apartment development plan on the corner of Lake and Park. The village showed up in our boardroom to tell us that they didn't want whatever kind of, the transient people and all sorts of different accusations that were leveled against the plan of apartments. No one showed up to say, let's make this affordable. No one said this was the opportunity for teachers and for frontline workers to live in River Forest. So the board at the time took the lead from the community, and we decided not to go forward with that development. It was a pretty telling moment. I think the same thing would happen again, truthfully. But I wanted just to remind you that some of you have spoken today, remember that, and I don't remember hearing some of these same arguments. But you're all doing a good job. Thank you for your work. I know how important it is and time-consuming it is, and I trust that you'll do the right thing for the village. Thank you, everybody.
Okay. Thank you, Susan. Please *6 your phone to mute yourself. Is John Grant on the line? If so, could you *6 your phone to unmute yourself? John?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you, John. Thanks you.
Okay. I guess 2 responses to what Susan just said. Number 1 is I think times have changed. And then number 2 would be I think it sounds like she's advocating for a document with no teeth. I think if there are issues with the agreement that was made at Lake and Lathrop, it would be that there weren't enough teeth in it. So an argument with no teeth isn't necessarily worth a lot. Or an agreement or a document with no teeth. Okay, so first I want to thank all the members of the Plan Commission for the work that they've done so far on the affordable housing plan. And I want to stress that if residents ask for a deeper dive into some of the details of the plan, this does not take away at all from the work that's been done so far. At a time when the nation and actually the world is reeling from the death of George Floyd and when many River Forest residents are expressing dismay and concern about unequal treatment or inequality in general at this moment in our society, I think it is worth the effort for the Village of River Forest to more carefully or deeply consider how housing policies might help foster diversity and inclusivity. After all, when we say that we want people to be treated equally, we're not talking about treated equally as long as it's in some other village. We're talking about treated equally everywhere, first and foremost, right on our own doorstep. To put this issue in a little bit of perspective, I note that while the village has created a task force to slowly and deliberately consider the treatment of deer living among us, we certainly can take as much time and consideration to consider how our policies are affecting our fellow human beings. If the board members will agree to a further look and to add more voices or resources to this effort, I certainly would be willing to join the effort, as I think many others would. And I also support the idea of bringing in outside experts to inform the process. I mean, I do have to, at this point, I have to make one note that, you know, I value all the work that all the, you know, volunteer people or elected officials that do for the Village of River Forest. You know, Kathy Aducey is wonderful, and, you know, the leadership she's provided through this COVID situation, the leadership that she was showing last week in response to this, you know, racial incident, and all the board members and everybody on commissions, you know, they spend their time. I just do want to note that, well, I don't know the details of this, but it seems to me that when River Forest staffs a commission, they don't necessarily look for people who have an expertise in the particular field that commission is addressing. I may be wrong about that, and if I'm wrong, I apologize. But I do think it's good to have an outside, to have some, you know, housing expert address this, you know, in addition to village residents and you know, business people. You know, maybe some of the, you know, that could have been done with the turf at the park in the village, bringing somebody outside. Okay, so, and then as far as details, I do think intentions are not enough. For example, if we want to preserve existing affordable properties, there must be a real world analysis of how that would happen. So from my perspective, this would not include the village swooping in with a heavy hand and artificially altering free markets or unfairly affecting property owners. The solution would need to encourage a healthy free market, but would include incentives or strategies on behalf of the village, such as incentivized exclusionary zoning or tweaks to the TIF districts. And the analysis would take into account all parties that would be affected by regulations or incentives, including the village as a whole. The main point being that the devil's in the details. You know, this is a process that is just not difficult to flesh out, but we need to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. Okay, that kind of concludes our public comment section. So I will now close public comment and ask.
Phyllis Rubin is waving.
Is she on?
Yeah.
Is she on the list?
I don't know if she's on the list. I know
Sorry, Phyllis. I didn't see you on the list, but you're more than welcome to talk. Please.
Okay, and I happen to be on video because I have trouble getting into the phone. So hi.
Oh, no worries. Welcome.
Okay, well, I do also want to, I think most of the time you probably feel like you're in a thankless job because we come and we speak up when we see something that we're concerned about. I know you all do yeoman's work and women's work on planning commissions and on the board. I can't imagine how much you've had to read for just this one meeting. And I will sort of just talk about parts of what I wrote you. I'm at 411 Ashland Avenue in the Chatterton condominiums, and I've been here now for 5.5 years. Getting there. I'm also a member of Arbor West Neighbors. I know you have a letter from them also. That's the seniors group, grassroots seniors group that really lobbies for the needs of seniors. As you can see, I am one. I know this plan is going through a number of iterations by the Plan Commission. I still am troubled by some of the language in this plan. I was at a Plan Commission meeting where they directed to be taken out of the plan something that actually said that this could be a burden on the village. Affordable housing development could be a burden on the village. That was removed. However, there is still a paragraph in there that says that, I'll read it on page 5, the regulations being relaxed were presumably adopted for the protection of the community, especially the neighboring property owners. Allowing more intense development therefore may adversely affect the character of the neighborhood and possibly diminish the value of the neighboring properties. And the neighboring property owners would bear the cost. I think that's called a burden. I don't know why this language is still in there. I have to tell you, if any of you have had the chance to go and Google, do affordable housing development in well-off communities decrease property values, you will find a wealth of articles and studies that tell you it doesn't. It doesn't. So I don't know why this is in here. It doesn't. I gotta say, they might be rare instances, but they are rare. And most of the time, either they have no different effect on it, or property values continue to go up. That's what you find when you read these articles. So I know someone spoke earlier that said you didn't want property values to go. None of us want the property values to go down. They don't. In real life, they don't. It should not be in this plan. And so the question is, what's the perspective of the person who wrote the plan, or the thinking of the person who wrote the plan, that this language is still in there? That bothers me a lot. And I'm sorry to cast aspersions, but I have to ask that question, because I didn't write the plan, and you guys on the board didn't write the plan. Someone else did write the plan. So it supports these fears that homeowners might have about property values going down, and it is not the case that this happens. We are a fortunate community, but we should not strive to be an exclusive community. We should not accept a plan that seems to imply that we can't possibly work for more affordable housing, rather than a plan where we demand a plan that says how we can and will successfully do just that, and what's more, we will do it well. This can be done. I have, I have someone who goes shops for me at the Jewel, and she brought me some food today, and I was telling her about this because it's very much on my mind. And she said, well, property values. They said all the usual things, and then she said, well, a village like Highland Park wouldn't do this kind of thing. So let me read you from the Highland Park Inclusionary Housing Plan. Inclusionary housing has the potential to increase the supply of housing for the city's workforce. Such action helps local employers attract and retain employees, the people who keep our communities safe, teach our children, maintain the economic health of our business sector. Furthermore, by providing opportunities for people to live near their place of employment, the city can benefit from reduced traffic congestion on local streets. Developers of covered projects must provide 20% of the total units for sale or rent at an affordable housing price. And the plan ends by this statement. The city's experience with the affordable units that it owns or manages and its research on the experience of other communities with inclusionary housing programs indicate that such programs have no adverse impact on property values. Our plan should say that too. And it would behoove the board, once we get a good plan, to educate the community to not fear this, because it will do us good, it will do many other people good, and we could be proud of it. So I hope you follow everybody else's wishes for this to make this a better plan. Thank you, and vote no.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. Okay, that does now conclude our comments, which only leaves us a little bit, but we'll go ahead. So I'm going to ask, let's see, we're going to have this the discussion of the affordable housing plan. Now, Lisa, do you want to begin? And then we'll have John and David make a statement after.
Sure.
If they want.
Kathy, can I just interrupt a second and ask for a point of order here? This is Patty. Sorry.
Yes.
Can you hear me? So I would just like to get a sense for, even for others who are on the call here, and recognize that we are 10 minutes away from our regularly scheduled meeting. And so for residents who are hoping to tune in for that meeting, what's the plan here in terms of how long we're going to let this go before we start that meeting too late? Only because I would certainly hate to have that meeting run too long, particularly for, I imagine, the Keystone residents who are going to want to be part of hearing the discussion we have on their flooding issues, which doesn't come to the end of our meeting. So I think in all fairness, I'm not sure that we...
Sure. It's a good question. I mean,
so what's the plan here?
Yeah, good question. We could always ask the Keystone. We'll tell the Keystone that we're running 15, 20, half an hour late. Again, this is just the presentation. We're going to have another opportunity to talk through the plan on the regular scheduled meeting. So this is, we can either hold off and do the plan then, if that's what you all want, and take a 10-minute break. It's all up to you.
Well, again, I thought the intention of having this meeting as a COW meeting was to allow board members to have discussion without worrying about being at a point of moving forward with a vote or not. And
again,
we seem to be doing a disservice by having limited our time now.
Okay, well then let's go ahead, Lisa. Go ahead. Let's present.
Okay. Trying to get my slide deck here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I will be brief in my comments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you tonight about the affordable housing plan that's been presented for your consideration and approval based on unanimous support from the Plan Commission. As we dive into tonight's discussion, I want to briefly review the requirements of the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act. The Act recognizes the need for and encourages communities to incorporate affordable housing within its overall housing stock. The Act allows the state to define housing affordability on a regional basis, takes a look at the total housing stock in each community, determines how much of that stock is affordable, and determines which communities do not at least have 10% of its overall housing stock as affordable housing units. Those communities that do not reach the 10% threshold are not exempt from the Act and are required to create and adopt an affordable housing plan. Developers who believe that they have been unfairly treated due to the fact that the development contains affordable housing can seek relief from local ordinances and regulations that may inhibit the construction of affordable housing. According to the state's data, the overall quantity of River Forest housing stock that is considered affordable is 9%. As a result, River Forest is considered a non-exempt community from the requirement, and an affordable housing plan must be adopted. The Act and the Affordable Housing Plan under the Act must satisfy 4 requirements, and those requirements are set forth in the Act. So there are compulsory requirements that must be met in order for the village's plan to comply with the state requirements. First, it must show how many units are needed to meet the minimum threshold of 10%. It must identify which of the 3 goals that are provided in the Act the village will pursue. We can't create our own goals. The state sets them for us, and we have to select one of the 3. The plan must identify which opportunities exist in River Forest for affordable housing development and what incentives will be provided by the village to encourage affordable housing. So moving on from the brief background on the Act, I wanted to review the process that was followed to get where we are tonight. As you may recall, the Plan Commission unanimously recommended and the Village Board unanimously approved the new comprehensive plan, which recommends that the Village Board prepare and adopt an affordable housing plan that meets state's requirements. In September, the Village Board directed the Plan Commission to implement that recommendation. The following month, on October 21st, the Plan Commission held its first meeting on this subject. The consultant hired by the board to draft the plan, Housiel Levine, walked the commission through the history of the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act, the need for the village to have a plan, the compulsory requirements of the Act, and the commission selected the goal that they believed was appropriate for River Forest. The goal they selected was to increase the village's affordable housing stock to 10%. Of course, River Forest can exceed the 10% requirement. The Plan Commission returned in January to review the first draft of the plan and to provide feedback, which was incorporated into the draft affordable housing plan. They did so again in March and in May. And in May, the Plan Commission unanimously recommended the plan, which is before you tonight for approval. At each meeting, the Plan Commission received public comment, both in live testimony and written commentary from the public. So I just want to take a quick second to talk about the various goals that are available underneath the plan and walk you through the Plan Commission's discussion and the information in the Affordable Housing Plan regarding the village's goal. So first, the Act requires that the village select one of the 3 available statutorily defined goals. As previously mentioned, the Plan Commission unanimously recommends increasing the percentage of affordable housing to 10%. Again, of course, it could be at least 10%. The Plan Commission did not recommend increasing the percentage of affordable housing in River Forest by 3% because it would require the addition of 115 affordable housing units. So in other words, 3% addition would take us from 9 to 12. Of course, 12 is fine. No one is opposed to 12. But if we think about this in terms of the math needed to achieve the goal of increasing affordable housing by 3%, if 15% of all new development is affordable, the village would have to add 766 new housing units to the community to achieve the goal of increasing affordable housing by 3%. 766 new housing units is 20% of the village's overall total housing stock right now. It's a good goal, but it may be unrealistic for the village given the fact that the community size, makeup, and status as a built-out community limits the opportunities for redevelopment and new development. The Plan Commission did not recommend requiring that 15% of all new residential construction and development be affordable. The plan does not advocate for mandates on the proportion of affordable housing units, nor does it mandate that the village be required to provide zoning relief. The plan gives the village the ability to consider each development and its impact on the surrounding property on a case-by-case basis, and I'll come back to that point shortly. So within the plan, we have to identify the need for affordable housing in River Forest. The state publishes data approximately every 5 years, and under the Act, we are required to use this data to determine the number of affordable units in River Forest and the number of units needed to meet the minimum 10% threshold. Shown in the table here, which is also available in the plan, in 2018, which is the latest data set, it showed that we were 1% or 39 units short of the required number of affordable housing units. That compares to 217 units in 2013. So according to the state's data, the village has gained a significant amount of affordable housing units since 2013. We believe that there are problems with this data, but regardless of any questions that we may have about it, we are required by the Act to use it. The plan must also identify opportunities for affordable housing in River Forest. It is unlikely that new or rehabbed single-family homes will meet the definition of affordable. Therefore, the plan focuses on creating affordable housing opportunities in multifamily and mixed-use developments within the village's perimeter corridors. So the plan mentions specifically the perimeter corridors, but it does not exclude Lake Street. The plan also recommends that the village consider allowing ADUs in the R1 and R2 single-family districts as a mean to create more opportunities for affordable housing units. The act requires that the village identify the preferred incentives it will use to encourage and accommodate affordable housing. The Plan Commission unanimously recommended that the village adopt zoning bonuses as the preferred incentive. Zoning bonuses include relaxation of the village's bulk regulations such as building height, setback, density, etc. In other words, using the relaxation of standards to accommodate buildings that may be a little taller or have a greater number of units than what the developer would have otherwise been entitled to in order to accommodate the inclusion of affordable housing units within a development. It's important to note that new mixed-use and multifamily developments are subject to the plan development process in River Forest, and that the Development Review Board and Village Board will have an opportunity to review each proposed development on a case-by-case basis. Further, the Plan Commission recommends that the Village Board consider initiating an amendment to the zoning ordinance that would establish compliance with the goals and policies of the Affordable Housing Plan as one of the several standards that the Development Review Board must consider when making recommendations for all new planned developments in River Forest. In conclusion, the Plan Commission unanimously recommends that the Village Board adopt the Affordable Housing Plan. The Affordable Housing Plan includes additional recommendations that are not required by the Affordable Housing Planning and Appeals Act, but that the Plan Commission believed would create additional tools in the toolbox to encourage affordable housing in River Forest. To summarize the recommendations in the Affordable Housing Plan, the Plan Commission recommends that the Village Board consider text amendments to its zoning ordinance to modify the village's bulk regulations to better accommodate the inclusion of affordable housing as part of a new development. And that references back to the zoning bonuses we talked about earlier. It also recommended that the Village Board consider amendments to the village's regulations to accommodate integrated supportive housing. The Plan Commission recommends that the Village Board consider text amendments related to accessory dwelling units and the plan development standards that I just mentioned a few moments ago. The plan also recommends that the village explore strategies to preserve and enhance existing affordable housing, and that the village highlight affordable housing's eligibility for TIF funds, and that the Village Board considering leveraging those TIF funds to support affordable housing initiatives. The recommendations within the Affordable Housing Plan will require additional study and community input. Some of those recommendations must be taken up by other advisory bodies, such as the text amendments, which must be brought before the Zoning Board of Appeals during a public hearing. With that, I'll conclude my comments. I note that Plan Commission Chairman David Crosby and the village's consultant John Housiel are participating tonight virtually, and both of those gentlemen are available if you have any questions.
Okay. So I am, I'm going to get back to my screen here. Okay. Oops. I think I just put myself out here. Okay. Let's get back. All right. Is there any questions we could, I think at this point I will open up the floor to the, again, this is to the trustees. John's on the line. David Crosby's on the line. David, I don't know if you want to just say a few words. You're happy to do so if you're on the line still.
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Great, good. Well, thanks so much for letting me talk just briefly here. Just a couple things I just want to highlight with what Lisa said, and it's just important to keep in mind as we discuss this, and that is the phrase case by case. As of right now, we have the Design Review Board where developers come in, they present to the DRB, they make a recommendation to you all, the trustees. What we have in this document is a suggestion that that the DRB consider what the affordable housing plan when they make decisions about a development. So, at these meetings, we have the public that comes out, and most often the developer shows up and says, I want more density, or I want a taller building. It gives the DRB an opportunity to inject affordable housing into these plans, into these projects. And to be honest with you, in the past, when I've been on the DRB, it's always been a resident that comes to the table and says, hey, what about affordable housing? By doing this, it forces the DRB to talk about it and bring it to the table and say, okay, is this the project? Is this where we should be doing it? But it also gets the public involved, where those that are affected, that are directly around this project, they have a say, and they can hear and be a part of the discussion and the recommendation to you all. So that's an important point that I want to make. The second point is, a lot of the phone calls that we heard from this evening are, talking about that the plan lacks specifics. And I hear you on that, and I do agree, and that might be surprising, but I agree in that this document is a plan. It's a framework that, in essence, a compass that points us in the direction where we want to go. And many of these bullet points, areas that we want to pursue, should be looked at by committees that are more specialized in looking at that. So, for example, if we're making a change to an ordinance, we should have people that are involved in the zoning board possibly look at it and be involved in that conversation. Or Opportunity Knocks, that nonprofit would be a good group to be on a committee to deal with some of these specific points. So yes, I understand the criticism of it being lack of specifics, but that's to a point by design. So that's it. I just want to make those two quick points as you all discuss.
Okay, thank you, David. If I can ask everyone to please mute their phone, *6, because we have a lot of feedback. If you don't mind, *6 to mute. David, I'll just ask a few questions. I mean, there were quite a lot of good points made this evening. We talk about creativity. A few of the residents that it lacks creativity. Could you respond to that? I'm not quite sure exactly what the resident meant, but from your point of view and being the chairman of the commission, what do you think we could have done more of in that area of creativity?
When I think about creativity, I think about the suggestion of going to look at additional dwelling units in our community. I think it's a very creative way where we have single family homes where it's very difficult to inject affordable housing into that zone. But by looking at additional dwelling units where someone that's a senior that maybe would need a caretaker that could then stay in a coach house to care for them, or someone that's like a boomerang kid who went to college and they're coming back and they're going to stay at home, but they can then pay rent in an additional dwelling unit. So, I think of that as a creative solution. It's something that's becoming more and more popular. I saw that the city of Chicago is now considering that as a part of their plans as well, which was after we put it in ours, I might add. But anyway, I don't know what other what other context as far as creativity. I just that's what comes to mind for me is how we've been creative with this document.
Okay. Well, I have a lot of other questions, and we could certainly wait until we get to the point of on the regular meeting. So I'll then go ahead and open up any questions to the other to the trustees. Any questions for David, Lisa, John? I know he's on the line. Okay. Oh, to *6.
Yeah, can I suggest?
There you go.
Can I be heard? Anyone hear me?
Okay. Well, wait a minute, Tom. It's Katie. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple questions, I think, for David.
Okay.
David, someone mentioned at the beginning of the comments that there's a penalty if you don't submit a plan on time, but there isn't a penalty if we don't meet our goal. And I wondered if you could talk to that. Is there a penalty if we don't have a plan submitted by June 28th, which I think is the due date?
Okay, so I want to get John Halsey in the conversation on this because this is all required by the state and their requirements. This is not, it's nothing in the plan that we've said, okay, there's no penalty. This is, dictated by the state. So John, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So real quick, I'm not aware of, nor does the Act state that there is a penalty for not having a plan. I know that many communities will state that if they don't have a plan, then they may go to get a state grant or funding or assistance, and they don't have a plan on the books, they may not be likely candidates for getting the state grant or funding or assistance. So there is no, and again, there has been this requirement for an affordable housing plan requirement for those communities with less than 10% on the books for more than a decade. And even as we speak, 46 cities in the state don't comply. And I think the reason most or a lot don't comply is there's no hammer, there's no penalty, if you will. So I'm not aware of a penalty if we don't have a plan. It's also important to note that the state doesn't say if you don't hit your goal of 10% or if you don't hit your goal of 3%, there's any penalty or hammer, because the state even says, and I'm quoting, this is from the state, this law may have little practical impact on communities that are essentially built out, because they know how difficult it is to move the needle. And then they said the intent of this plan, and this is from the state, it should work to provide some moderately priced housing as the community grows and develops. So the state knows the challenges, and particularly with established and fully built out communities, with trying to hit these goals. So there is no penalty for not hitting a goal. And I'm not aware of any, and Katie, I'm not aware of any stated penalty for not having the plan.
Okay.
Thank you. So I have a second question, and again, I thought it was for David, but maybe someone else can chime in. I think the first speaker was Judith McDevitt, and she said something that resonated with me, and that is that this plan focuses on multi-unit dwellings and multifamily developments. And it says that River Forest is going to bump from 9 to 10% by focusing on that, on multi-unit dwellings, multifamily projects. And the way that we're going to get affordable housing in those projects is by offering incentives in the form of zoning variances, and there's various names for this, but I think that's it. And that will incentivize developers to include affordable housing in their projects, because they'll be able to put more units in a development. But my question is that my observation, my understanding is that in River Forest, our zoning ordinance is not up to market standards, and that any developer who wants to build in River Forest is requiring a zoning variance at the get-go without even having affordable housing as part of the discussion, and that's exactly what happened at Lake and Lathrop. So my question, I guess I'm reiterating what Judith said, is how can we say that we are offering these incentives, whether it's relaxation on parking or more units, or change in the setback, in exchange for getting affordable housing, if we know already that we have to offer that anyway, even to get a developer into the room?
Okay.
Katie, I'm happy.
Hang on, John. 1 minute. Let Lisa wants to just answer it, and then you can augment it.
Sure. Katie, I think somebody's
Okay, if you please mute your phones. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think that point is brought up in the Affordable Housing Plan when the Plan Commission makes a recommendation to, for the village to consider text amendments to its zoning ordinance to create opportunities for those bonuses so that the developer may have that leeway or that relief as of right as opposed to having to seek special permission.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of feedback here, so sorry, Katie. So, go ahead.
Okay. So Lisa, are you saying that we're going to change our zoning to relax our zoning for those types of things across the board, or just for affordable housing projects?
So you have two recommendations, one from the comprehensive plan and one from the affordable housing plan. The comprehensive plan indicates that the village board should consider examining its bulk regulations, in particularly in the key commercial corridors, to really kind of address this issue of the ability to develop here in River Forest within our existing standards. And as you mentioned, like in Lathrop, and you mentioned site development allowances, variances, the different phrases that we use to describe the same thing, which is ultimately relief from our ordinances. So the comp plan talks about the village board taking a look at the zoning ordinance as a whole. The affordable housing plan takes it a step further and says not only do you need to take a look at your zoning ordinance relative to non-affordable development projects, you also need to take a look at your zoning ordinances specifically related to affordable housing projects.
Yeah, I know it's hard to. I asked a very similar question, Katie, and again, what?
I'm sorry, my fault.
Oh,
we discovered the echo.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
All right. Did you hear that, Katie, or do you want us to redo it? Okay, very good.
I heard it, but I have to follow up and say it sounds to me like there's a concrete bundle of variances or offerings that we can make to a developer to entice them to develop here overall, and then as a subset of that, offer affordable housing. And according to the comp plan, there's a recommendation that the village board look at adjusting our zoning to perhaps offer some of those or relax some of the standards. I don't understand how we can say in this plan, we got these extra incentives that are going to cause a developer to want to offer affordable housing, where we already have had to offer these incentives to get a developer into the room without affordable housing on the table. I don't get it.
Yeah. Go ahead, John. I mean, it's a great question, but go ahead, John.
Yeah, and Trustee Brennan, you're exactly right. And it's a complicated issue. What was highlighted, I think, over the last, and again, I'm a resident for more than 20 years. I've been the village's planning and zoning consultant for more than 20 years. And I've reviewed every plan development over the last 20 years. And there is a real consistency with developers requesting site development allowances or variances or variations to go higher than allowed or density that's allowed. So it's really what Lisa said. It's sort of twofold. One is the recommendation to examine the commercial and mixed use districts. Should we go higher? Should we go more dense? Should we allow more density? Okay, that's one. The other one is, can we look specifically at how we can leverage these against affordable housing as something that the village wants and give incentives? So this is how this could work. I hope to get at your question. If we change the zoning, because right now the height limitations in the districts are pretty antiquated and they don't accommodate contemporary development. If we raise it from, say, 40 feet to 60 feet or 40 feet to 55 feet to get another floor on there, we can then say, listen, we've raised the standards in all the zoning districts. We're going to stop giving out allowances and variations so easily. We reconfigured our standards. Developers abide by the new standards. We've recalibrated. Then we could say on top of that, if you're proposing affordable housing, then maybe that's something we would consider an allowance for, because that's something we prioritize. So if you do both of those things in coordination with one another, then the allowances really become to be much more an incentive for somebody proposing something the village prioritizes, like affordable housing, or retail or commercial development on the ground floor as justification to go higher. If it's a straight up development without economic development or out affordable housing, they don't get the development allowance. They meet the standards and that's it. If they can get us something we prioritize like affordable housing, then we'll talk to them about maybe going higher. So if we do both, if we look at the standards across the board, and in addition, look to leveraging development allowances through the PD process for affordable housing, those two could be a very significant incentive for developers coming forward. If you propose affordable housing or retail, maybe get an incentive. If you don't, live by the standards. So as a package, it could be very powerful, but that takes a lot of exploration. When we raised that in the comprehensive plan process, it was one of the things that residents really were most concerned about because of proximity to residential properties to commercial properties. But those two hand in hand, if coordinated, could really serve as an impetus to support the provision of affordable housing and be an incentive.
So I actually have some questions along this line, if that's okay. This is Patty.
Sure.
So I guess I'm kind of looking back on how things played out with Lake and Lathrop and the experience there. And I guess, David, not to put you on the spot, but I know you were part of that process. I know even in those meetings, you shared some frustrations with trying to recommend some changes to the design of that plan, right? And the feeling that at your board, you didn't really have the teeth, basically, to really push for those changes to happen. And so that plan did require several variances to be approved. And so there were discussions around, providing these variances without them taking into consideration the standards that several members voiced that they had wanted. And so I guess my concern here, again, without having specific language that really, that it's not just this would be a nice thing to do, right? Without more of a narrative or specifics, I feel like we're still in the same situation we were with that. I really don't see, unless we have some concrete direction, more specific narrative, that even through the DRB process, I'm not sure how this current plan is going to help inform DRB members differently than it seemed some felt frustrated by with what we have now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think either John or David can answer it, but it's the the process that we go through and the text amendment that is being actually discussed and recommended, so that it would kind of hit at the DRB. So I'll let you answer it, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I understand your concern, and I think that that's as a committee, when we talked about this, we said how do we force the DRB to bring up affordable housing? Because I've been on the board for 5-6 years, and it like I said, it always comes to a resident that brings it up. So we put in this that the under additional considerations, number 5, consider amending the plan development standards to specifically identify consistency with the goals and policies of the affordable housing plan. So it says to us, you need to consider this. You need to figure out, if this is the development that we should have affordable housing in. Okay. Now, this, case by case basis versus a blanket where we say all the commercial projects must have affordable housing. Okay. There are some scenarios where there's property that won't get developed because of that. And this case-by-case approach allows us to be flexible in looking at it and saying, okay, if there's a apartment building that's all affordable housing that's being torn down, yeah, we need affordable housing. That's not acceptable. versus, let's say, a property that's been hasn't been developed in 20, 30 years that we're throwing another hurdle in front of. So that is, that's the dynamic of if you apply, a mandate across an entire zone versus looking at it on a case-by-case basis. John, did you want to?
Hang on, wait a minute, Bob. Just let's, Patty, go ahead and finish your thought if you don't mind. Were you going to ask?
No, I was going to follow up. So again, I understand what you're saying, and there could perhaps be the argument that this should be on a case-by-case basis, but again, my feeling is without more specific, concrete guidance, nothing kept the DRB from bringing up affordable housing at the table. It didn't have to come from a resident, and if it did, there was nothing preventing the DRB from adding it to their conversation. So I don't think just having it in the document is going to be enough, because again, we have a list of standards that it was clear several DRB members wanted to see enforced, but they weren't. And so I guess that I'm just back to, I don't understand how this is ever going to be enforced if it's just they have to be forced to talk about it. Okay, but then what?
Well, I think another point to this is that at those meetings are the residents, and who are often voicing concern over increased density or increase in height, and that needs to be a factor as well in our decision on where we put affordable housing. And if we're going to say every piece of property in this commercial district needs to be, in addition, if you provide affordable housing, you get an extra 15 feet. That could negatively impact the residents right around that particular site. And so that conversation has, the people in the room are the residents, the developer, and the DRB, where they're all there and then where they can talk about this, as opposed to saying, well, all of this entire zone has to, the zoning, requires, or you have the option of doing that, and that's out of the hands of the DRB then. If I'm making sense. John?
Yeah,
let me just take a shot at this. Now, I'm trying to speak with brevity here, but Patty, I think what you're asking for in terms of being not the specificity you're looking for in this plan is exactly the point, because it's specificity the DRB needs and the village needs going forward that they don't have right now. But those are really in-depth conversations. It should probably include the EDC, maybe the ZBA, the Plan Commission, forums with local developers to say, are these new standards realistic to get development? If we quit giving allowances, what is that height that works for you? And what height is appropriate in different areas of the village, regardless of type of development, affordable or not affordable, because it has an impact on adjacent property owners. And real side note, one person raised up specifically that there was language in here about adverse impact on adjacent property values. That was not in any reference to affordable housing. That was to buildings being taller to accommodate affordable housing. If we don't do this wisely and we just let huge buildings go up, huge buildings that violate our standards could impact local property values because the building was too big. So it's not a commentary on affordable housing. When it was raised at the public hearing, it was immediately corrected when it came up. But if the village adopts this affordable housing plan, and the plan says, village, start working on new DRB standards, and one of those standards has to address affordable housing. They don't have that now as a provision to even use as a standard. They could have brought it up, but there's no standard of measure that is regulated. It could be. Let's create that. It's beyond the scope of this plan. Should we redo the standards for height and density in the commercial districts? We sure as hell should take a look at it. I think they should probably be higher in certain areas. It's beyond the scope of this plan, but this plan says we have to look at that. So if we look at that and assign those responsibilities and make those changes, it begins to immediately impact decisions made by bodies in the village.
Well, and I'll just kind of correct you. I don't think it's beyond the scope. I think it's not the responsibility of the Plan Commission to look at text amendments or standards, right, for the development, for our zoning board.
Well, and I think, the reason I say it's beyond the scope is that's a 10-month-long discussion just to look at zoning standards. It's another 6 months with maybe another group to look at DRB standards of review. And if all these little specific things get folded into this before we can adopt this, that direction's not given. This clearly says we had to do this, let's get at it. We had to do this, let's get at it. We have to amend the zoning for this regard, let's get at it. So it sets forth several actionable recommendations that the village should then start to pursue. That's the value of this document.
Okay.
And if we do that, the DRB would have the direction, Patty, I think you're talking about.
No, I guess I would disagree, because I feel that it's my understanding of all the discussions and all the conversations around the comprehensive plan, and then along with the affordable housing plan, is that these two documents should help inform everyone else to all other decisions that we're making. So again, to go through the process you're discussing, and I recognize that might be things we need to do, but again, if we don't have this plan to help guide the thoughts and conversations of those boards that are going to drill down into what needs to be changed in terms of what we as a community want to see with those changes, it's not going to happen. What informs them on what things they should be looking at? I mean, even the committee around take height, for instance, in the comprehensive plan, there was a lot of discussion around what the table should be regarding height, right? Lots of conversation around that. I know during the Plan Commission meetings, when the suggestion is made about increasing a height, right, in order to offer more, there were commission members who said, well, now wait a minute, because we sort of talked about what we wanted as a community in regards to height in the comp plan, but now we seem to be throwing that out now that we're to the point of how are we looking at this for affordable housing and what we're going to allow as an incentive to be able to get that. I don't know that we can actually do these in separate silos. I think it has to all sort of go in tandem and help inform these other decisions. I just don't see how you do it otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's in one where it says other considerations when it talks about the comprehensive plan, the height restrictions, and better accommodating affordable housing. The only reason it's beyond the scope or the Plan Commission really doesn't have the responsibilities because when you bring this over to the zoning board, they begin to start having public hearing meetings. They begin to have a process that allows them then to talk to residents, to talk to developers, to begin to flesh that out. So what does that look like? That's how I envision it, right? Right?
Correct.
If I'm wrong. Okay.
So could I have
Yeah, go ahead,
now,
Bob.
please?
Yes.
So so David, I again, as I stated last time, I appreciate the work that you guys have done. I think this is one of those things where we need to have a framework for discussion because we have a couple of things going against us. The first being we're a landlocked community, so we don't have a lot of opportunities for big development. And what it does for us is it opens the conversation with developers, okay? And what it doesn't do is it doesn't close the door on developers. It gets people to come in and stand at the front desk, ask to talk about it, and have an understanding of, so what are the rules that I'm playing by when I come into River Forest? And I think having a plan with an action plan behind it for following work is the way to make sure that we have maximum flexibility. It's like when we talked about cannabis. We want to have special uses so we can control where the cannabis goes. The conversation, we have to have a place to start the conversation. And we can't have a policy, that again, because of the economic conditions in our country today and in our village and everything, that prohibits us from doing that. Okay. Several of us ran on the platform that we wanted to increase economic development in River Forest. And having a plan hopefully gets us there. Having a policy that is so restrictive may not get us there.
Okay. I've just got a couple of questions that I think Megan brought up, which were quite insightful. She talked about tracking losses and gains of affordable housing units. Did the committee talk about? I mean, that seems like a simple tracking system. Do we do that just by virtue of the state law, or how do we handle those tracking obligations and not even obligations, but tracking of that information?
It's an interesting task. We don't currently track it. We are required in the plan to use the state's data. So even if we did start to track it, if our data disagreed with what the state was telling us we needed to use for an affordable housing plan, we would have to be using the state's data.
Yeah.
That's something we can look at. We would have to just give some thought to how we establish those metrics, because again, we have to use the affordability charts provided by the state dating back to 2018. So I would just want to give that a little bit of thought.
But what other things, again, going back to Megan's comments, what other things do you believe, David or Lisa or John, that we could do that can create more granularity in reporting, more understanding of, where we're at with affordable housing? I mean, I think Megan brought up some very good points that those are the areas that I think we could add to our discussion, certainly at any point in this journey. I mean, I don't think whatever we decide tonight, that doesn't stop us, I assume, from looking at those particular points. And in fact, I would insist that those are areas that I think I'd like to see this plan kind of grow into. Okay.
Sure. Certainly we can establish metrics as part of the implementation of the affordable housing plan that the board can review and establish that those are the appropriate metrics to look at. So yeah, absolutely, we can incorporate that.
All right. So what we should do, unless there's any further questions that anybody has, we'll go ahead and jump into our. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody off. Tom, did you have a question? I know you tried to get in about 10 minutes ago.
I was just going to propose that we go to the meeting and then continue the discussion once it comes up, once this item comes up on the agenda. But
okay. Well, good. We're reading minds then. All right, then why don't we go ahead and close the committee of the whole meeting.
It looks like Erica would like to talk.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, Erica. Didn't see you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's okay. No, I guess that I am agreeing with what Patty is saying here in terms of if we don't have specific items in the plan, if we don't have something that says that we're going to require throw a number out there, 15% affordable housing units when you come to create something, the DRB doesn't have any reason to do affordable housing then. They can just go ahead and put something in, and you look at Lake and Lathrop, close to $1 million homes there. There's no reason for them to do it if there's not something there. And it's hard for me to see otherwise if we don't have something more substantial in the plan. John, I did want to ask you about something that Carolyn Kilbride and Sue Conti brought up. So we see in the original draft that you presented to the Plan Commission in January, there's something between 50 to 75% of verbatim wording from the 2004 Wilmette Affordability Plan. And could you tell us about your decision for making that, going through that process and using that plan?
Yeah, I'm actually glad, Erica, you asked that question. So, and again, I wish some people would have taken me up on, my offer to talk with anybody prior to this. But there are 46 communities in the state of Illinois that are non-exempt communities that offer less than 10% of their housing stock as affordable, according to the state's 2018 guidebook. All right. We reached out to all 46 of them. We heard back from a lot. We didn't hear back from a lot. We asked for plans from as many as we could get. We asked for everybody, but we got about, I think, 14. We asked how the plan was developed. We looked at every plan. We asked if the plan was developed in-house, if it was used a consultant, if so, who the consultant was, if it was done by planning staff, administrative staff, village attorney. And of all the plans we got, and we heard some things back from people that said, we're working on it. We have been for a while. We don't have one. We're doing it in-house. So out of all the communities we contacted and heard back from, and it was everyone on the state's list, not one used a consultant, okay? Out of all the 46 we contacted or heard back from, and it's every non-exempt community in the state of Illinois. So I know there was some talk about seeking an affordable housing expert with a ton of experience helping communities like this meet this state requirement. There is no such consultant with all this experience writing these plans to meet this act, because they're all being done by staff or village attorneys or city attorneys. A couple of communities said they tried just using their comprehensive plan to meet the requirements, and it didn't cut muster. And so they think they're going to have to likely do a plan like this after the fact. Some were much more brief than one we put together. Some were a little bit longer. The most robust one, and mentioned by one of the speakers, was Highland Park. Highland Park's had an affordable a housing commission for 40 years, 25, 30 years. They have, and they own affordable housing developments and have for 37 years, 39 years, and 40 years. Their housing commission actually owns and is part ownership, village ownership of affordable housing developments. They have one of the most complex 40 years in development housing things going. So looking at as a model, a housing authority that can purchase and owns developments, et cetera, was beyond what we could even begin to get into. We may evolve into that, that'd be great, but it wasn't applicable. So after we looked at everybody and everything and talked to staff, we then said, let's zero in on the communities that are most reflective of River Forest character. Are they 100% built out? Because that's really challenging, as the state's act even acknowledges. We then looked at affluent communities where real estate prices are higher than other communities because real estate property is so expensive, it's hard to make affordable housing happen. The gap is bigger between profit and not profit. So there was a system to looking at these, and after doing all of that, we tried to come out with one that was concisely written, very clear, was actually adopted, had met the requirements of the state mandate as a template for moving forward. So Wilmette, I thought, after looking at several, and the Northbrook one is very similar. There are others that are very similar, a lot of typical language. And the reason the language is so similar in a lot of regards is it's required language. All of them sort of echo back exactly what the Act says. All of them echo back what the provisions have to be. All of them echo back the fact that we have to examine incentives and select an incentive. It all talks about the 3 goals that we have an option for and why we picked the goal that they said we had to pick from. So there's a lot of language to meet the requirements that cities use as template language to say we're meeting. And again, the comprehensive plan said to craft a affordable housing plan to meet the state requirement. My mandate was to work with the Plan Commission, and the Plan Commission's mandate was to work to create an affordable housing plan that met the state requirement of this particular act. So we were very methodical. We did a ton of research. We contacted everybody we could, looked at every plan we could, examined how it was done and by whom, and then picked the one we thought was most applicable and representative as a starting point. When we first met with the Plan Commission, we proposed no plan. We had a working session just to talk about ideas, concerns, the state act, and then we came back and said, here's what we think the starting point would be. And I remember saying at every meeting, we can make any change we need to make. We will make this entirely and uniquely ours. We can eliminate anything you want. We eliminated a bunch. We can add anything you want. We added a bunch. We can modify any language. We changed a ton of language. We incorporated stuff that Dan Lauber and other residents brought to bear. The Plan Commission debated extensively. They didn't all agree on stuff. We had some pretty good discussion about ideas. Every idea that was brought up, I know some residents said things were just ignored. Nothing was ignored. Inclusionary zoning was specifically addressed. ADUs was brought up. We thought it was a great idea. 1-for-1 replacement, that was discussed. So all of these things were vetted and discussed, everything. But just because it didn't make it in the Plan Commission's recommendation doesn't mean it's there by omission or because it wasn't considered. It was considered and not recommended. So I'm glad you asked the question. So that's why we zeroed in on Wilmette as a starting point. That is why a lot of the language you see is representative of a lot of different affordable housing plans, because it's language meeting the statutory requirements of this narrow act. So different communities do it differently. Most all of them are very, very concise Word documents. We didn't see any with colorful maps, or a couple of residents talked about a really granular level of specificity in properties and buildings. We didn't come across one that did that. They described corridors or areas of the community or from this block to that block, and we did the same thing. And what we said was the perimeter corridors are the most likely areas to see affordable housing, although it could be appropriate anywhere in the village that's in the plan. So we didn't narrowly say it could only be in the corridors. That's just not the way it's written. So a lot of effort went into it. It wasn't arbitrary. It's not plagiarism. It's not somebody else's plan. This is uniquely River Forest, and from my take, the process worked exactly the way it should. As a starting point, we researched a template to get us off the ground and initiate the process. Once we had a working discussion of ideas, then we introduced a template to start working off of, and we substantially changed that template over 9 months. So to me, it worked extremely well. But Trustee Bachner, that's how we got to that product as a starting point. That's why we selected that community, because it was a similar characteristic, similar dynamics, similar economics, similar challenge. They had a proven plan that met state criteria and actually got adopted. So many of the communities we talked about said we tried, we couldn't get anything adopted, we abandoned the process. We heard that from several communities.
Yep.
And I don't want to be that community. So I did what I thought was best to lead this village through a plan that was responsive to River Forest and met the strict requirements of this act. So that's how we got here.
Yeah.
You know, and some of that, John, you know, when you use exact language and you're going from 2004, you know, and a Wilmette, which is a difference, similar but different than River Forest, there's a lot of stuff that's happened in the past 16 years. So, you know, when you talk about the character of River Forest and the plan, you talk about parents wanting to move by their children and, you know, be close to their children. We almost have an opposite thing going on right now. We have for several years, right, where children are actually moving back close to their parents. And so part of what concerned me with that is that there wasn't necessarily an eye to what River Forest is like right now, because that verbatim language was used in the original plan. And then I guess my question also is, did you take a look at towns that were exempt that had affordable housing plans?
I've looked at them over my career. I'm familiar, and I've looked at a bunch for other studies in other communities. But again, my charge was to craft an affordable housing plan to meet this state requirement act. So my focus was, in order to make sure we did that, was to look at communities that had the same charge we did to meet the conditions of this act. So if I looked at another community that had a different approach to affordable housing, it may have been a bit more visionary or a bit something else. It might not have met any of the standards. So I looked at meeting the communities that I thought did a good job with clarity on this. But things like ADUs or one-for-one or inclusionary zoning, these were all things that were discussed by the Plan Commission that weren't brought out by other, it wasn't a template brought forward, and they were reviewed and discussed. Some made it in, some didn't, like the ADUs did, but the one-for-one did not. So, and again, to try to make it more contemporary and specific to River Forest, the section about the context was one of the most heavily reworded sections. So, again, the Plan Commission ended up with at the end of a 9-month process is very specific to and reflective of River Forest, which to me is an indication that the process did exactly what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, I guess, why didn't it start with some of that is a little bit concerning to me.
I guess I would say that it did, but you might think it maybe should have more. So.
Yeah. I know that you put zoning mandates into the plan as something that other towns use, but we aren't considering here in River Forest. Other towns use other techniques as well, and those weren't listed in here. Scattered site acquisition, employer-assisted housing, which are in other plans. Was there a reason not to include other tools that other villages have used, even just to give the Plan Commission an idea of those, and maybe not use them?
again, a lot of other ideas came up that were discussed that weren't codified as, hey, we also thought about this. It also says we didn't look at 101 replacement in TIF districts, but we talked about that extensively, but we didn't put that in as a consideration. So this was to begin to start the dialogue of other considerations. And over the course of 4 meetings, we talked about a lot more than aren't even enumerated in here. So we could go back and say, you guys could approve this, the board could approve this and say, we approve this, we want you to put in everything the Plan Commission talked about. We could do that. So there are some things that some communities somewhere might have done that we didn't discuss, probably, possibly. I think it's impossible when you explore any plan, whether it be sustainability or affordable housing or bicycle, that somebody somewhere might be doing something you didn't consider. It doesn't mean down the road you might say, boy, they're having a lot of success with that. Let's take a look at it. So we looked at a ton of considerations. We enumerated several. We talked about several more that didn't put in the plan in terms of the fact that we talked about it. Our record indicates that we talked about it. But I'm sure there are some out there that some have done that did not get talked about. I'm sure it's impossible to capture everything, so I'm not going to say, no, we captured every single possible consideration. I'm sure there are other ones out there. It's why once plans get adopted, every several years they get amended and updated because new things happen. So I can't say, and I'm not going to say, we considered every single possible option any community has considered. I'm sure we have not. But we addressed the ones I thought were most applicable for River Forest as a starting point. And then we talked about anything anybody else brought up, resident or community.
So David, I'd like to, Erica, if I can just intercede here for a minute, because I think it's important to hear from David Crosby as the chair, running the meeting with the other 6 commissioners, going through all of the elements of this plan and what could have been in and what isn't in. I'd like your perspective on that. How did you feel the process went? How did you feel where the plan landed? And did the whole fact of this Wilmette 2004 plan even bother, you and maybe some of the other commissioners?
Sure. So at our first meeting, John, it was really educational for us because he went through, as you have in this document, the different incentives. These are the different levers you can pull to attract affordable housing in our community. And so he gave us the pros and the cons to these, which are outlined in this document. And then he said, so what do you guys want to do? And to be honest with you, I thought he was going to tell us what we should do. And it was nice because it was just a moment where we're like, okay, we're doing this. This is our committee. We're going to lead this thing. And John is here to help guide us, of course. So we gave him feedback. He went and revised and put together the draft. We met again. We had healthy debate about all kinds of options, from residents and as well as from the different committee members. We revised the draft again, and then we revised it again. So when I look at this document, I only see River Forest because all of us really were honed in on that. That's why we're here. I frankly kind of expected a template for John to begin with, some type of template as a launching off point, and that's the way I kind of view that this kind of played out. Is that here's a start, and then we customized it so that it's speaking to the issues in River Forest. We heard a lot, and I was just thrilled with the discussion, and I'm thrilled with the different people that called in this evening. I would have loved to have everyone participate in every one of those meetings. But anyway, I'm happy with it. I think John was a big help in guiding us, but not ramming anything down our throats for sure. This is our committee's work. It's no offense, John, but it's not your work.
So David, one last question from me. Do you believe there was any missed opportunities, as I think was stated by one of the residents? When we were going through this, there's always a missed opportunity because you can never get 100%, but do you believe that you never really talked about some of the major issues that needed to be addressed around affordable housing? Did you believe that you missed that opportunity, or did you believe that, you talked through it and the document is what it is?
No, I believe we pursued and talked about all these different options. And Frank, Dan Lauber was a big help in provoking us and getting us to think of alternatives. And there are some things in here that have his fingerprints on it that caused us to think and rethink things. So I'm pleased with the work.
And I got one last question. Just to remind the trustees and the residents that are on the phone, what is your background?
Oh, sure. I'm an architect. I've had my own practice for, 16 years. And so it's something I love doing. And, when I moved to River Forest 7 years ago, I wanted to volunteer in some capacity. And fortunately, I've been able to do this and help you all out and contribute in a way, hopefully in a positive way.
Yeah. No, you have. Thank you so much. And I'm going to guess you know a lot about development, given your background. Okay. Any further questions? Again, we'll take.
I do have lots. I mean, so.
Yeah. We can go into our meeting and we'll have more questions too. So go ahead. I mean.
Okay. Well, okay, that's fine.
No,
but
yeah.
We're gonna come back,
we'll
we're
take
gonna
all
come
your.
back to this basis of using this as a template. I've got thoughts, but.
Okay. Hang on to it. We will get to everyone's questions. I promise you that we won't leave tonight until we do it. All right. So why don't we leave the committee of the whole meeting? Adjourn. If I can have a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Okay. And a second?
Second.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All opposed. Okay. So
7:51.
7:50. All right. So